Welcome to another episode of Burning Questions. My name's Craig Wells and I'm joined today by Hassan. Hassan, take it away. Please introduce yourself and your company. Tell us what you're all about.
Thanks, Craig. I'm Hassan Ahmed. I'm a chartered architectural technologist by profession, going on about 18 years, and probably the last 10 years or so delving into more fire safety and more recently building safety as well. In the last year, I set up TETHION, and TETHION is essentially a specialist in building regulations principal designer services. We offer that as an advisory service to support other duty holders, or it might be as the principal duty holder in itself. As I said, also do fire safety consultancy. So the name is derived from the fire triangle. And so, as we know, the fire triangle is, there's three key elements: the fuel, oxygen and heat. And what I tried to do when I set up the company was come up with a name that brings all of that into the picture. So I sort of related that with three key disciplines in any given project, and that will be usually the architectural profession, M&E and structural. So that's the ignition of a fire. So then I wanted to step it up a notch, and so what sustains the fire? It's the chemical reaction, the fourth element, which then brings in the fire tetrahedron. And that's where TETHION comes in as the chemical reaction that brings all of the disciplines together. And that's where the names come from.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you for that. So tell me a little bit about the types of projects you're involved in, the sorts of clients you work for.
Yeah, so the projects we work on are a right mixed bag. So at the minute, we're working on some life sciences projects, working on some public library projects, residential, a couple of high-rise HRB projects, but predominantly non-HRB projects. And in amongst that, there's a fair share of healthcare projects as well.
Yeah, excellent. And geography, are you covering the country or are you mainly focusing on the northwest?
I've got very little projects in the northwest actually. It is very much nationwide, and that might be London, Birmingham, Manchester, up as far as Newcastle.
So I guess we all feel like we're all a small cog in a big machine sometimes. We're a manufacturer, you're a consultant and so on. Teamwork, it requires teamwork, doesn't it? And I guess the process of Gateway 2 applications and so on has really highlighted the need for more teamwork.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the challenges that perhaps Gateway process has exposed in terms of teamwork and collaboration, communication.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I suppose the main thing we need to sort of address is that Gateway 2 hasn't really created more problems. What it has done is it's shone a light on the problems that already existed. For example, proceeding to construction with premature design information. That is something that Gateway 2 is now obviously putting a blocker on, but it's an issue that already existed. And the reason why it's a challenge now is because industry isn't au fait with resolving those issues at a much earlier stage until we get to construction and when it becomes a problem. So that's one of the key challenges, I suppose, that Gateway 2 has or is addressing. And what we try and do is even for non-HRBs, we try and address that from the outset. What we've got to remember is Gateway 2 is also good practice.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. It's as you say, we're not necessarily expected to do anything different than what we should have been doing. It's formalised it, hasn't it? I think we still got a little bit of a challenge with some people who still see it as an option. We have to do this for Gateway 2, whereas this isn't going through the Gateway process, so we're going to resolve these things once we get to site. So I think changing the culture is a challenge still. Yeah. But that bigger picture of why we're doing it, protecting people and property and providing a safe building is going to take a little bit of time, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would you say about the timing of bringing everyone together? We talk a lot up here at Quelfire about early engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, timing is critical, and it's. I think it's difficult to say that any one particular party should be involved in terms of manufacturers and other specialists. It should be involved at stage 2 or stage 3. I mean, it's all dependent on the complexity of the project, isn't it? And sort of all the other interfaces that are involved, that are sort of. That are involved in that particular project as well. All of that needs to be taken into context. But generally speaking, if you are designing something that's then is also defining something else, then really whatever it is that is also defining, all of the stakeholders in that other element also need to be brought into the game as well. So, that might be at stage 2, it might be at stage 3, it may be even earlier. Yeah, but absolutely, early engagement is key, and I suppose building safety is predicated around collaboration and early engagement.
Do you think there's sometimes a bit of a challenge around trying to pigeonhole things into stages, the REBA stages? Again, you've referred to stage 2, stage 3, and we often join meetings ourselves, and it's like, well, we're not doing that because we're not at that stage yet. And it's like, okay, but you want to know this information, or you want to know this solution. If you want to know this solution, we need to know this detailed information.
Yes.
So although you're not meant to be doing it until a later stage, I think there's a danger of pigeonholing things into stages.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the bigger picture, as you say, if something is impacted by something else, there needs to be more holistic.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, the RIBA stages, they provide a framework, don't they? But it's not a framework that we have to adhere to verbatim. You've still got to understand what the interdependencies are of the work that you do. And if there is an element that needs to be, that needs to come further forward, then absolutely that needs to happen, irrespective of what the RIBA stages are and where you are in the project. And I think that's probably highlighting one of the issues that we have in the industry, is that everyone tends to be driven by scope, yeah. And I think we almost need a cultural change where you're not driven by scope. You are driven by understanding what it takes to achieve a building at the end that is safe for occupants, because that is the end goal. Now, if that means that some things have to move around, then absolutely that's a necessity that needs to happen.
Yeah. Freedom within the framework.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. It's like having your it's setting out the goals and the lines on the pitch, isn't it? But then there's freedom within the team players to do what they need to do to get the end result.
Situational awareness.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it's something that the fire service and the fire brigade have to deal with.
Yeah.
Have to deal with every day.
Yeah, that's good. So another question we got here was, where do hidden or unspoken assumptions cause the most trouble? I think, again, this probably relates to the sort of collaboration piece as well, where other people think other people are doing things and responsible for things, and
touches on the previous point about being driven by scope.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues that we find are because of interface issues and things that are interdependent of one another, but not being raised or talked about at an earlier stage, because everyone assumes that either it'll get dealt with further down the line, or it'll get dealt with at a later date or by somebody else. But it may not be getting dealt with by somebody else. But at the very least, you have a duty to raise these issues. You have to talk about them, and then once they're on the table, at least then they're no longer unspoken assumptions. They can be addressed. But yeah, those are one of the key issues that we find, is people assuming that somebody else will do something, but it doesn't happen, and then you end up in problems later down the line, And I mean, to give you a good example of that was recently on a project, which I won't name, the architect put forward a cavity barrier solution for a facade, but there were no discussions had with the wider design team, with the fire engineer, nor the contractor, about that particular product and and the parameters that control whether that is suitable and fit for purpose in that context. Now, once it's on site, discussions opened up with the cavity barrier manufacturer, and then that raised an issue with the field of application not being applicable in that scenario, and then having to undertake either a fire engineering judgment or an assessment. But the problem is that expertise didn't exist in the team. So because that expertise didn't exist in the team, we're now in a situation where either the design has to change, or the client has to then go and appoint someone else to undertake this assessment for them. You know, and it's all of this is additional time and money.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if it's spoken about at the earlier stage,
Yeah.
you're engaging with the relevant manufacturers or specialists and making everyone else in the team aware of those discussions, then you can quite easily address those things before they become problems.
So we talk a lot here at Quelfire about you know, our strap line, because it's your job to know, and I think that's probably one of the challenges sometimes, is that there's maybe an assumption that architects or consultants know everything about everything, and they don't, and they can't be expected to. So I think it's you almost need to have that assumption that you don't know, and to challenge everything that you're doing and proposing. As you say, you know, cavity barrier might look right, it might look fit for purpose, it might say 2 hours on it.
Yeah.
Fire collar, 4 hours. Can of expanding foam filler, 4 hours. But it's understanding where that 4 hours, 2 hours, so on, is achieved, isn't it? So linking into that question really about assumptions, we haven't mentioned competency yet, Hassan. We're doing quite well. No. We measure competency, don't we, through the SCEB model, so skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviours. And I guess the audience will forgive me for being repeating myself, but behaviours is the most challenging thing probably to measure, and in some respects to manage. What behaviours do you see? Well, we could look at it from both angles, I guess. A positive sense, you know, or a negative sense that perhaps restricts the flow of information and restricts collaboration. And I guess it's kind of what you alluded to before in terms of the assumptions, but also what's not in my scope, you know. But
Funnily enough, I think it was about 2 years ago where we did this, and I think competence was the subject at hand, wasn't it? But things have, I'd like to think that things have changed. You know, people are sort of getting better. Behaviours are starting to show in a positive light as well. And I guess if we start off with the negatives, and then we'll finish on the positives. So I suppose the biggest issues is where individuals perhaps still not being familiar with the new regulations and the new requirements, but even beyond that, still not wanting to do what's right, and going onto the point about it being your job to know as well. I don't think everyone has taken that responsibility seriously.
No.
And when we get to that point, I think, you know, then, you know, that's going to be the point at which we start to get safer buildings.
Yeah.
But up until that point, I think there's still some work to do on that front.
No, I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah.
And we at Quelfire will continue to bang the drum because it's your job to know.
Yeah.
As you say, it's that wanting to do the right thing, isn't it? You know, I think we've had experience of contractors who have reached out to say, well, how can you support us? We've got this. You know, in this particular example, it was a Gateway 2 submission, and we outlined the process, which they thought was quite onerous. and came back to us a few weeks later when we followed it up, and they said, oh well, we've changed the design, we're not going through Gateway 2 now, it's not a HRB, so we don't need your input. You know?
Yeah.
And that was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is just a box ticking exercise, nothing's really changed.
Yeah. It's failing to realise that, you know, there's a wider benefit to doing this, isn't there?
Exactly. Oh, there's lots of benefits.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, that's a small isolated incident. On the whole, I'd agree with you that there's been a massive change of behaviours, and people actually seeing the benefits of it, not just that tick box exercise.
Yeah. When I've been in meetings, you know, for projects at sort of a pre-construction stage. You know, I'm going back to the RIBA stages again. You know, at stage 2, stage 3, and people are talking about fire stopping and service penetrations, talking about, you know, who they're going to be using going forward, whether it's going to be Quelfire or others, and you know, those are, you know, those are the right conversations to be having at that time. You know, if you can nail down which manufacturers you're going to be using, that will absolutely make life easier as you sort of transition through projects.
Yeah, I totally agree. So do you think we're starting to get some sense of what normal is in terms of design and then build? Rather than the traditional design and build, or we're still build and design?
I think we are still, unfortunately, building while designing, which isn't. Well, you and I both know it's not a great place to be in. We would much rather design than build.
Yeah.
But I think the commercial realities are leading industry in that way. Where, having said that, though, I think the industry is prioritizing those areas where they know they need to sort of address the design in sooner rather than later, before it becomes a problem. So whilst it's not a clean line between design then build, I think there's a clearer line between design and build than there was before.
That's very helpful. Yeah. And from I guess it's almost a statement rather than a question, this one, but time and money, you know. If there's more time, there's more resource, there has to be a better job, better outcome. You must have some experience with different projects with different resource, whether it's time and design teams and consultants and so on. But what's your experience?
I suppose time is one of the biggest challenges that everyone has to deal with, and you know, that is one of the main reasons why whenever we do have a failure on a project, it's because inevitably it was because of time and resource. If you were to go back to a pre-construction stage and have sufficient time to address things, to talk about things, you know, it only takes one person not communicating something at a pre-construction stage for it to become a problem later down the line. If we have the time to be collaborating and communicating in a better way, then we can absolutely nail the construction process and have safer buildings.
Yeah, I guess it's that understanding that a building is almost a system of complex systems, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And be making enough time and resource available to intertwine all those systems. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So in terms of responsibility, I guess we're all familiar with the diagram that came out of the Grenfell inquiry, the web of blame, as we call it. And really there should be a web of responsibility. Do you think, Hassan?
Yes.
You know, it does require everyone to input, and there's some overlap over each other's responsibility. But
yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent point, because if you take this back to the amended regulations through and the new duty holder framework, where you've got the client, PC, PD, designer, and contractor. What we've got to remember is manufacturers have a pivotal part to play in and amongst that ecosystem of duty holders, you know, and And going back to the point about early engagement, whilst we're engaging all these duty holders, manufacturing needs to be in amongst that 100%. And and then you can start, really thinking about responsibilities, because once you start having conversation with manufacturers, it makes scope clearer. You'll understand better, well, which designer is responsible to do that in order to have a compliant solution at the end. But as I say, in order to do that, you need to be speaking with manufacturers to understand what they need.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So I guess we probably touched on it to some extent already, but from a manufacturing perspective, we often feel as if we get brought in quite late to the conversation. We're obviously doing our bit in terms of trying to get in front of people with our CPDs and educational content. When would you say, if we were to go to REBA stages, when should designers be reaching out to manufacturers?
Again, depends on what it is that we're designing. Fire safety. If we focus on fire safety, I would suggest it needs to happen generally stage 2, stage 3, and that will be dependent as well on what it is that we're looking at. So, for example, if we're looking at dry lining, well, dry lining has a number of other interfaces that you need to consider. So, fire doors, service penetrations, any other apertures that sort of that are in that wall as well. Discussions about deflection heads and things like that as well. All very important matters. Now, you can't just design or specify your dry lining in isolation. All of these other aspects need to be considered as well. So therefore, if you are specifying your dry lining at stage 3, then absolutely you need to be having those same conversations with the
other elements in that wall.
With the service penetrations, doors, all of these other things that we need to consider as well. So it all depends on, I think, what it is you're dealing with at that particular time. Early engagement is important because you can start building relationships, and this is what it all comes down to. It's having good relationships with everyone on a project to be able to talk about things openly, all your risks on a project, and then you can address those. Without early engagement, you can't. It's very difficult to be having those conversations because you don't have that relationship to be bringing these issues to the surface.
Yeah, that's good. And I know for me, again, apologies to my audience, but leadership, absolutely fundamentally important. We have good and bad examples of it, but we can join project meetings where there's an element of acknowledgement of what needs to be done, but everyone's a little bit, well, that's not, as you say, not in my scope. We've never done this before, so on. Whereas we can join other project meetings where there is really clear direction, really clear leadership right from the top. And it's almost, come on guys, this is the way we are doing it. Or you move on, we'll find another consultant. We've literally had sort of instances of that. So where that's, from our experience, where you've got that really clear leadership of what good looks like, what the process should be, as you say, Gateway 2, you kind of have to do this anyway, but acknowledging that that's just good practice and we should be doing this anyway, I think is really key. So
leadership does have a massive part to play in it as well, and I suppose the biggest thing is just going on to the point about scope. If it's not within your scope, then it needs to be in somebody's scope. Someone needs to take lead to ensure that it's in someone's scope. And I suppose, leadership doesn't come isolated. It needs to be, it's part of an individual's understanding of what's required in a particular project. They need to understand what it takes to create safe buildings for people and occupants. And then you can lead, and then good leadership will go from there.
That's been very insightful, Hassan. Thank you. Is there anything else that we haven't discovered that you think our audience should know?
I suppose if there's anything that I'd like to end on, it's the idea that safety is led by our reasoning and not by the absence of consequence. And what that means is everything that we've discussed already about assumptions. Assumptions are a huge risk on projects, especially when they're not talked about. And they need to be brought to at the forefront of a project and discussed and closed out as the project goes on. And that will then deal with half of the issues that we often find at the end of a project.
So thank you again for joining us, and thanks again to our audience for joining in on another episode of Burning Questions. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and look out for the next one.